Imagine a courtroom that doesn't belong to Earth, but exists in the courts of heaven. The air trembles with light, thrones stretch farther than the eye can see, and at the center, the Creator sits in silence. Before him, an angel kneels, wings frayed by the dust of rebellion. Every other angel who crossed that line was cast out forever. But this one is different. This is Sariel, a name known in ancient Jewish tradition, often tied to the story of the Watchers, the Guardians, and the question hangs in the air like thunder. Why does his story feel like mercy reaching into a place where judgment normally falls? What did he do that made him different? And what does his story mean for you? Because if there's hope, even in the heavenly courtroom, then maybe there's hope for you too. Stay with me to the end of this video, and you'll understand Sariel. This story reaches back to the days before the flood, dives straight into the shadow of rebellion, and then, unexpectedly, opens a window into grace. This is Biblical Mysteries, where we explore parts of scripture and ancient tradition they never taught you in Sunday school. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any journey into the deep waters of the Word of God. Long after Eden, but before the world was swallowed by judgment, there was a council of watchers. They weren't warriors like Michael, they weren't messengers like Gabriel, they were guardians, appointed to protect the order God had established, and among them was Sariel. He wasn't the biggest or the loudest, his armor wasn't covered in battle scars, and his voice didn't thunder across the heavens. Instead, there was something about him that made others want to draw close, a quiet depth in his eyes, as though he was always seeing something far away, beyond the horizon. Sariel was given weighty responsibilities. In ancient tradition, he's associated with watching over the spiritual condition of humanity, observing the invisible war beneath the surface, the impulses, the corruption, the rebellion that begins inside the human heart long before it erupts in the streets. From the edge of the heavenly realm, Sariel often looked down on the earth, watching human life spread across the world. Families moving through forests bursting with life, children splashing in streams, laughing without fear, a man shaping stone into tools. He watched the seasons shift over their heads, the warmth of summer, the cool whisper of autumn, the stillness of white snow. And as Sariel watched humanity, he felt something not every angel understood: compassion. He didn't only see them as a piece in the Creator's design, he saw their struggle, how they stumbled into danger, how sickness struck without warning, how hunger could bring even the strongest to weakness. And it began with small conversations, quiet whispers in the courts of heaven. Why do we have to stay so far away? If we walked among them, we could guide them directly. We have knowledge that could protect them. Why keep it hidden? At first, Sariel tried to ignore those whispers. He knew the Creator's command: do not cross the boundary between heaven and earth unless you are sent. It wasn't about pride or control, it was about timing. Then something happened that tore Sariel's will in two. One night, Sariel stood watching a small human settlement below. A child lay sick in a mother's arms, breathing thin and weak. The mother's eyes were wet with tears as she whispered prayers to heaven. Sariel's chest tightened with pain. He knew there were remedies hidden in creation: plants, leaves, roots, things that could ease suffering and bring down fever. That knowledge felt so close, it was like reaching out and touching it, and yet it was forbidden to give without authority. And for the first time, Sariel questioned the rule. Not long after, the Watchers met in secret on the summit of Mount Hermon, a place so high its peak seemed to press into the belly of the sky. 200 of them gathered, their forms blazing under starlight. Sariel stood among them as their leader, Shemihaza, spoke. "Brothers," Shemihaza said, his voice rolling like distant thunder, "you have seen their pain. You have watched them struggle. We have power to end this, but to do it, we must descend, not as spirit, but as men." A wave of agreement moved through the assembly. Some hesitated. They knew the cost. But Shemihaza continued, "If all of us do this together, there is no turning back. Let us swear an oath together. If one falls, we all fall. We will bear the consequences together." Sariel's heart pounded. He thought of the child. He thought of farmers who couldn't read the rhythm of the seasons. He thought of mothers afraid of what they didn't understand. And when the oath was made, Sariel did not walk away. That night, they fell from heaven like a rain of living stars. Humans ran up the mountain where the Watchers now stood in human-like form, yet their eyes still burned like the core of fire. And the people were not afraid. They reached out, overwhelmed. Sariel knelt among them, touched the earth, and breathed in the scent of the world for the first time. He taught them to track the moon's cycles, when to plant, when to harvest. He taught them how to crush leaves into tea to ease pain and lower fever. At night, he sat by the fire and told them stories of the stars. stars. But not everything that was given was good. Some watchers shared weapons of war. Others taught practices that bent the human soul. The more knowledge poured out, the more humanity's innocence faded. One night, as Sariel watched the people he had wanted to save, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Two men fought with metal blades. Blood spread across the ground, and the eyes of the killer were not filled with regret, but with pride. That was the first sting of sin. He had wanted to heal, but had they opened the door to destruction? Then a voice came, like wind moving through bone, not heard with ears, but heard with the soul. Sariel. He knew instantly it was the Creator. What have you done? The weight of that question crushed him, and for the first time in all his eternity, Sariel learned what fear feels like. The night the summons came, the sky above Mount Hermon split like glass. The people below felt it before they even saw it. The wind died, birds fell silent, even insects hid. The air grew heavy, like creation had taken one single breath and refused to exhale. Then the light hit. Not the gentle rise of dawn, not the silver wash of moonlight Sariel once loved. This was light that pierced bone and soul, heavenly glory descending in judgment. The watchers were seized. Angels of fire and wind, unfallen, unshaken, were sent to drag the rebels back. Sariel did not resist. Some of his brothers fought, faces twisted with rage and disbelief. Others cursed the messengers, screaming that what they had done was noble, insisting God was unjust for punishing them. Sariel only lowered his head in silence. The faces of the humans he had once taught flashed through his mind. The child who had been healed, the grateful families, the farmers who could now feed an entire village. And then the bloodshed he had witnessed. In the end, had he given them life, or had he handed them the tools to destroy life? Picture a space so vast, the distant stars burn like torches along the walls, its floor like glass, reflecting an endless light overhead. And at the center is the throne, the seat of the Creator, where justice and mercy meet. Michael stands on one side, Gabriel stands on the other, their expressions unreadable. The watchers kneel, some defiant, some trembling. Sariel simply closed his eyes. This time, the Creator's voice was not like wind, not like thunder. It was everything. You were placed among the holy ones. You were trusted to watch over my children, and yet you descended. You rebelled. You corrupted. A low ripple of protest murmured among the fallen. Silence. It wasn't a shout, it simply was, and the entire throne room obeyed. The judgment came like lightning. Every watcher who had descended would be chained, imprisoned beneath the mountains, in a place no light could reach, until the day of judgment. No appeal, no second chance, no redemption. One by one, angels of fire stepped forward, wrapping chains of light around the hands and wings of the rebels. Those chains didn't just bind their bodies, they burned into their spirit, severing them from the song of heaven. Sariel felt it, a sudden emptiness, as if something had been ripped out of the center of his very being. The connection to God was gone. And in that silence, Sariel understood what hell truly is. And this is where Sariel's story begins to turn in a different direction. Many watchers spat curses as they were dragged away. Others plotted revenge, their minds twisted by pride. But Sariel began to weep, not out of fear for himself, but because he finally understood the damage he had caused. He remembered the child he had healed. He remembered the men who had forged weapons from the knowledge that had been handed down. And he whispered, so softly the throne room could barely hear it, "Lord, I'm sorry." No angel had ever spoken words like that from that place. They were taken down into the depths of the earth, far beneath the mountains where they had first descended. The air was ice cold. The darkness was absolute. For the others, the chains were the end. They sank into bitterness, their souls twisting into something almost unrecognizable. But for Sariel, the chains became a furnace. In the silence, when there was nothing left but his own thoughts, he began to pray. He prayed for the humans he had taught, that they would hold on to what was good and reject what was evil. He prayed for the watchers who mocked him, hoping that somehow they too would see the truth. And more than anything, he prayed that if God gave him even the smallest chance to serve again, he would take it. Time passed in the watchers' prison, not in days, not in years. Time was different down there. Others counted time in bitterness. Sariel counted time in prayer. He had no light, no sky, no moon to measure the passing. The role God had once given him had been stripped away. All that remained was the steady rhythm of his soul bowing in repentance. Then, one moment, Sariel felt something he had not felt since the throne room: presence. At first it was faint, like the smell of rain before a storm, or the distant warmth of a fire you haven't yet seen. And then he heard it. Sariel. His eyes snapped open. He thought it was only memory, an echo of the past. But the voice came again, no longer crushing judgment but softer, almost gentle. Sariel, stand up. In the darkness, the chains around him began to tremble with a strange light. Not the blazing fire of judgment, but a warm, living gold. The others stared, unable to believe it. What is this? One hissed. Why him? Another snarled. The light flared brighter, and for the first time in ages, Sariel felt the pull of heaven drawing him upward. He didn't know why. He didn't dare ask. He only whispered, "Thank you." And then he vanished from the depths. Sariel stood once again in the courts of heaven, but this time, everything felt different. Before, he entered as one who belonged there, confident, clothed in glory. Now, he stood as one who had been stripped bare, humbled, and completely dependent on the mercy of the one before him. The Creator's voice filled the space. Sariel, do you know why you are here? Sariel bowed so low his forehead touched the glass-like floor. No, Lord, only that you called and I am here. I have seen your heart in the darkness. You grieved not because you lost your place, but because of sin. You did not seek glory for yourself. You sought my mercy. There was a pause, a silence that made it feel like the entire universe was leaning in to listen. Stand up, Sariel. Your chains have been broken. I send you out again. Sariel trembled. Lord, am I worthy? No, the Creator answered plainly, but my mercy makes you so. He was given a new role, no longer a watcher in the old sense. Now Sariel would serve as a guide for human souls, a healer for the wounded, a guardian for those walking in the shadow of death. Some traditions say this is when Sariel became an angel of healing, working alongside Raphael. Others say he became the Watcher of the Moon again, but this time not to reveal forbidden secrets, only to keep the rhythm of God's created order. Whatever the title, one truth stood above them all. Sariel was the first and the only fallen angel to be restored. The news spread through the armies of heaven like fire in the wind. Some rejoiced. Angels who had loved Sariel welcomed him back with joy. Others couldn't understand. Why him? Why not the others? Does this mean any fallen angel can return? Michael, the eternal commander, answered bluntly, no, mercy is given to the repentant, and only Sariel repented. When Sariel opened his eyes again, it wasn't to the blinding light of heaven, but to gentle moonlight over a quiet valley. The air was cool, carrying the scent of cedar and wildflowers. A stream whispered nearby. In the distance, a shepherd sang to his flock. The last time Sariel walked the earth, he descended like a falling star, brilliant, overwhelming, terrifying in majesty. This time was different. No blazing glory, no crowds rushing to see someone from heaven. He arrived quietly, unseen, like a shadow that only those truly awake in the spirit could sense. That was the point. This wasn't a mission to be seen. This was a mission to serve. Not far from the valley, Sariel found a small village. The people were exhausted, clothes in rags, eyes heavy with hunger and worry. At the edge of the village, he saw a boy lying on the ground. The child's skin was pale, his breathing weak. A woman knelt beside him, desperate, trying to get him to drink from a cracked clay cup. Sariel knelt down across from her. She didn't know who he was. She only saw a stranger with gentle eyes. He asked, "What's wrong with your son?" The woman's voice shook. "The fever came 3 days ago. I've begged for healing, but the herbs I used to know how to use have been forgotten." Sariel's chest tightened. It was his fault that humanity had learned too much too soon, only to later, in fear, throw away even the good knowledge. But this time, he didn't reveal forbidden secrets. Instead, he knelt and prayed. His hand rested on the boy's forehead, and with a whisper only heaven could hear, he called upon the Creator's mercy. Within minutes, the boy's breathing grew deeper. Color returned to his cheeks. The mother's eyes brimmed with tears as she pulled him tight against her. "Who are you?" she asked. Sariel gave a faint smile. "A friend, nothing more." And before she could even thank him, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. From that day on, it became his way of life. Sariel walked the earth, moving from village to village. He cared for the sick. He guided the lost. He whispered courage into the hearts of those who had given up hope. Sometimes he worked through dreams, planting gentle direction in the mind of someone who needed it. Sometimes he simply walked beside the lonely, until they found their way home on their own. One night, Sariel stood alone in a field, lifting his eyes to the moon. It was full and bright, spilling silver over the land. The moon had once been his first assignment. Now, as he looked at it, he realized it had become something more, a reminder. The moon does not shine by itself. It reflects the light of the sun. And Sariel knew that was who he was now. He had no light of his own, only the light the Creator allowed to pass through him. Right there in that field, he heard a voice, low, familiar, and cold. "You don't belong here." Sariel turned and saw a fallen watcher, still chained to bitterness, still wandering in rebellion, driven to tempt and corrupt. His chains were spiritual now. The fallen one curled his lip. "You think serving like this makes you one of them again? You're still one of us, Sariel. You broke the law. You fell." Sariel's voice stayed calm. "Yes, I fell, but I asked for mercy." The other spat on the ground. "Mercy is weakness." Sariel stepped closer. "No, mercy is a strength you will never understand." Sariel's work on Earth stretched across generations. He crossed deserts with nomad caravans, sat in the corners of crowded marketplaces, and stood in silent forests, listening to the prayers of the alone. But one night, beneath silver moonlight, that voice came again. "Sariel." It had been centuries since the last time he'd heard it this clearly. His heart shook and he dropped to his knees. "Your time here is almost over," the Creator said. "But before you return to me, there is one last thing you must do." Far to the north, in a land buried under winter, there was a village that had turned completely from the ways of God. They no longer prayed. Violence and suspicion filled their days. But in that village, there was a little girl, 8 years old, whose heart still whispered to the Creator. Her parents were gone. Strangers had taken her in, people who saw her as nothing more than another mouth to feed. And yet every night, before she slept, she still spoke to heaven. The mission sounded simple, but it weighed like stone. Protect her, guide her, and bring her faith into the light. Sariel traveled north in silence, his steps soundless on the snow. The wind howled over frozen hills, but he felt no cold. He focused only on a tiny flame of faith he could sense. Her prayer, fragile yet stubborn, like a candle fighting the dark. When he arrived, he saw the truth. Hard faces, empty eyes, doors slammed shut against strangers. No laughter, no music. The girl was there, in a small wooden hut, kneeling by her bed. Her voice was barely more than breath. "Lord, if you can hear me, please send someone." Sariel could not appear in blazing glory. It would only terrify them. Instead, he took the form of a quiet traveler. He began helping the village in small ways, repairing a broken roof, carrying water from the frozen river, leaving firewood at their doors at night without a word. And to the little girl, he became a friend. He told her stories, not as revelations spoken straight from heaven, but as stories woven with truth about love, forgiveness, and courage. He taught her kindness, not as a rule, but as a way to live. Slowly, her faith grew stronger, and something unexpected began to happen. Her light started to spread. One neighbor helped her back, then another, a smile here, a shared meal there. Like ice giving way to spring, the village began to warm. Then one night, disaster struck. A hut caught fire. The wind drove the flames, and before long, the entire village was in danger. The little girl was trapped inside. Sariel rushed forward faster than thought. He cut through the fire, found her curled in a corner, and used his own body as a shield as he carried her out. She coughed hard, gasping, clinging to him. When they reached the snow outside, she looked up at him, and in that moment, she saw through the disguise. Her eyes went wide. "You're an angel." Sariel smiled gently. "No, I'm only someone God has forgiven." And before she could say another word, he vanished into the night. Then that voice came again, this time stronger. "It is finished." Sariel felt the pull, not the downward drag of chains, but the upward call of home. When he opened his eyes again, he stood before the throne. But this time, there was no fear. The Creator said, "Well done, Sariel. You were faithful in small things. You kept watch, not with power, but with love. Therefore, your place is secured." The halls of heaven blazed as Sariel received his place again among the redeemed, not because he had never fallen, but because he had been lifted up by mercy. Sariel's story is not only about an angel, it is about you and about me. We have all crossed lines we should never have crossed. We have all stood in places we did not belong. But Sariel's life tells us something the enemy never wants us to believe. It is not too late to come home. He is proof that God's mercy can reach even the farthest fall. And if there is hope for an angel, there is hope for you. Thank you for walking with me on this journey into one of heaven's most extraordinary restoration stories. If this message touched something something in you, don't let it end here. Carry it with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late. And remember, this is Biblical Mysteries, where we open stories most people have never heard, yet they can change everything. If you haven't already, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. See you next time. Stay curious, stay hopeful, and always keep your eyes on the light.